Clay and Ryan, we're going to talk with you guys about data. And I assure everyone, if they're like, oh, God, it's the end of the day and we're talking about data, these are two of the best people in our industry to talk about data in a fun way. Trust me on this. You guys really make talking about data fun. So we're going to get right into it. What?
We should have brought our logo. Ryan and I do a whole shtick with Lego, and it didn't even occur to me right now to bring it in there.
I haven't seen the Lego shtick, but Ryan and I have talked about data and spam before, and we're talking about canned meat spam.
Nice. Yeah.
We could talk about Legos. So my girlfriend's a female scientist, and she has all of her female scientist Legos. And, you know, it's fun. Oops, I got my directions off. But in both science and fundraising, data drives all of it.
There you go.
That's amazing. I love it. All right, we'll get the Lego background story here a little bit later. I am curious about that. So we're going to be talking about segmentation and getting specific about how to make to in all of this that you really are talking to the right people. And we've seen some good questions come in kind of about this today, and that's why I'm glad that we're going to open it up to you guys to talk about that. First, can we start with you just telling us who you are, what you're about, what you do? Let's start with Clay.
Sure. I'm Clay Buck. I'm a consultant. I've spent an equal amount of time as a frontline fundraiser as I have in consulting, but now I run my own firm called Tactical Fundraising Solutions, and I'm based in Las Vegas, Nevada.
What was the hashtag that Maureen just came up with?
Fire hose of love, sister. Fire
hose of love. You live in the fire hose of love city.
Oh God, yeah.
That is a much better nickname than some of our other city nicknames. Okay.
We're gonna rename Vegas. When Vegas comes alive again, it'll have a new name.
Oh man, yeah. And it's there's been some stuff talked about today that I've just been we're a lot of our doing that out here. It's tough.
Yeah. It is. And Ryan, Woroniecki. I got it.
Yeah.
Right?
You did. I have the title of most difficult last name out of anybody showing up today. So I'm the VP of Strategic Partnerships at DonorSearch. We're a prospect research wealth screening company. Been here for about 10 years. During that time, I've also served on the board of APRA Maryland. For those of you that don't know APRA, it's a wonderful organization. Think AFP, but just for people that deal with data in the fundraising world. And I also am, I don't know why they chose me for this, but I'm secretary of the board at the Giving Institute, which if you don't know the Giving Institute, think the Giving USA report that comes out every year. It's the 50 or so for-profit organizations that help, frankly, fund the research, go out, fundraise for it, author it, all that fun stuff. So I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, where it actually snowed last week, the day after it was 70, which is wild.
Wow. Amazing. Well, I know why they chose you, because you're good. You're good at what you do. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to your insights. And I want to talk first about, let's get your predictions, because both of you have a lot of fundraising experience and you both have a lot of experience with data. Let's start with you, Clay. What's one of your predictions on what's going to happen right now with our industry in the next normal? Months and years.
Yeah, and I gotta be really careful here because I don't want to bring the mood down. But just from that data perspective, I also got to kind of raise the okay, yay, right? Pivoting digital, yes. And there were a number of things said today about folks adapting new technologies and being ready for it. Another person I never ever want to be on after, again, is Liz Kruger. I feel like I've been following her for the last 2 months, and I'm with her just, yes, right, we're championing these things that we've longed for and hoped for. But I also have to kind of go, one thing we've got to be very, very, very cautious about right now is the security and ethics and laws around data management and use, because it's not a prediction as much as it is a hesitancy that it's going to take that one person or that one cranky attorney that gets the wrong solicitation, that gets invited to the wrong thing, that starts looking into data privacy within the context of something like this, and it's going to raise it for the whole industry. So while we pivot, while we adjust and adapt and get really great with some of these digital and start using some of the very cool they're not new, but as we start to absorb them, I do think we just have to be very careful about the data privacy laws that are being enacted, many of which are still working through legislations even now, and how we pay attention to the rules and regs that surround how we do this. Like, we can't just go out and grab email addresses and slam them in the database and start emailing people. There are rules and restrictions with that. We just need to be careful of, and we need to be aware of. In the second part of that, and it ties to what things that were talked about earlier, I really think there has to be a growth in leadership. We're going to need to see, like, a lot of this digital stuff and a lot of data-informed work is really going to have to be absorbed by the executive level and board leadership, because it's going to be so much more a part of our culture. It's not just, hey, you can go run the peer-to-peer, right? We can get an intern to do that. It's going to be much more ingrained with us, and it's going to have to be really championed by the leadership level.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Ryan, actually, we had a discussion one time on data privacy and data privacy laws. So I think it's interesting that you're calling that out as something to be mindful of. What would you add to this in terms of predictions on, what's going to happen based on maybe even just how we're looking at our data right now and how we're using our data to reach out to people at this moment in time?
Yeah. So the whole thing about which data to use and then what's going on with the privacy, that could be an hour-long discussion. So I'm going to walk away from that and just go right into what data do we have, what should we be using, how can we communicate with people, especially digitally, right? Since that gives the biggest impact, and that's kind of why we're all here. So the starting point is that if you're going to start segmenting your database, right, and database isn't necessarily a donor base, because in some situations you've got volunteers, you've got members, you've got subscribers, you've got patients, there's all that. And, so a starting point there would be, well, what are your constituency codes? And let's make sure we're communicating with people using those appropriately. Outside of that, from a fundraising perspective, if you're going to start to cut it down, there's a bunch of ways to slice and dice data, like the data that's in your database, not wealth screening or philanthropy screening stuff, but simply, hey, I can run an RFM. And so for those of you that don't know what an RFM is, it's a really basic process that a lot of for-profit companies use, where you just look at, okay, when is the last time somebody gave? How recent of a donor are they? How frequently do they give? So did they give last week? Did they give 6 years ago? The person that gave last week, they're probably going to be much more responsive to an email or a digital post, or frankly a digital message, right, if you want to use Facebook Messenger, than somebody that gave 6 years ago. And then the last part of it is money or monetary, right? Does somebody give a lot of money or a little money? And the basic part of that is you take all those numbers, you give everybody a percentile score for each of those three. So if we go way back to something else that's changing now, the SATs, right? They're going to be digital now, which is crazy. But if we think way back, we're in high school, we get our SAT scores, and we get our percentile scores. How do we do against everybody else in the class? The RFM enables you to do that with your donors. So you end up with these 3 different scores. You add them all up, 0 to 300, and okay. The people that are 300, they're priorities because they give more than most, they give more frequently, and they gave more recently. The people down at the bottom, you don't want to ignore them, but you're not highlighting them and you're not doing additional outreach for them because, you know, if you just think if there's some sort of a friendship score, this is awful to say, but one way to check the relationship with donors over their lifetime is, are they giving? How much are they giving? The RFM functions as that kind of friendship score. And so if you had a friendship score and you're moving, which now would be an awful time to move, but if you're moving and you don't want to hire movers, the way I did it was, you know, years ago, I said, hey, if you can help me, there's a bunch of pizza and beer in it for you. And essentially the people with the higher friendship score were the ones that responded. And it's no different now in this current crisis.
Oh, I remember the days of saying pizza and beer, help me move. But it's true. That's a good point that you bring up about that friendship score and thinking about that. Like who is it that's really showing up, right? So that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask each of you about next is how can you best tap into those with a high friendship score? So maybe we're thinking about those as our mid-level donors or our major donors. You have, you know, perhaps high friendship scores with people who give you, you know, every year in your annual program. But how are you maybe looking at those people need to get a different kind of a message than these other people that are in this different bracket of giving? And I think that actually taps into a question that we got earlier today, I think I saw in the chat, which was about like, people are losing their jobs, how to ask them for money right now. I think it's about how do you ask the right people for money right now and be sensitive to the people who are losing their jobs. So Clay, you look like you've really got something to say on this. So bring it to us.
And I'm also seeing Jennifer's question here in the chat because I think that applies to this. I mean, absolutely now is the time to be sure that we have the correct contact information. Noah was talking earlier and touching on what Seth Godin has been saying for years now, that we live in a connection economy. Well, data is the fuel of the connection economy. If we don't have information and don't know how to, just as simple as name, address, phone number, right? There's a big part of me that is, you know, yes, segmentation by affinity and involvement and all of that is extremely good. But who can we reach and how can we reach them? Do we have their phone number? Do we have their email address? Do we know if they're engaging? I mean, and this is where we are is it's much easier to get that information now than it used to be. Certainly, you know, back in my day, right? The digital appends that we can do, right? And getting that added to CRMs and databases, but also just the engagement that we can find. Who's opening emails? Who's reading emails? You know, it is relatively easy and relatively painless to find out who is engaging with you on multiple platforms, and investing the time and the energy to do that now, I think is what would really drive that segmentation, because we can make ourselves nuts going back to that lapsed and long lapsed person that we've never ever heard from, that, you know, we can make ourselves crazy trying to get that level of segmentation when the warmest and touchiest is going to be. That said, look at what all the direct response people are saying right now, and look at all the reports. Lapsed and long lapsed and non-donors are replying like crazy. And no experts in it that are just, their minds are blown going, we have never seen unengaged folks respond like they are now. So, right, let's not ignore those. It's just about being sensitive to and communicating with them. Well, it really all comes down to messaging and affinity. Just use the data to get you there. Would you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan, what would you say? What other recommendations do you have? I mean, you guys work with data all day long, and you help organizations make sure they have those right, pieces of data.
Yeah, so I'd add to that, so Clay, your point about not just the phone and the email, but are people engaging with you on multiple channels? So one of the things that you could do, there's a number of vendors that offer this service, even ones completely disconnected with this space specifically, the nonprofit market. You can grab somebody's Facebook handle in many cases. You can grab their Twitter handle. But you can actually have an understanding of the dialogue that they're having independent of you, so that when you communicate, you can do so relevantly. So the social piece is so big. And on the switch from, hey, we've got the annual fund donors, we want to move people to that mid-level funnel, which is always kind of tough. So what you can do with your own data, right, not working with a vendor like us, is you just simply say, okay, who are our mid-level donors? Let's pull out the characteristics from their database. Who has some of those similar characteristics? And so, it could be constituent codes. It could be engaging through multiple channels if your organization tracks that, which I hope you all will moving forward, because it's going to be so big. But it's also things that might live outside of the database too, right? So if you're able to figure out that a person makes larger gifts elsewhere, then they understand philanthropy and they demonstrate that in a bigger way. The other really important part is mid-level giving is so different at so many organizations because the culture of philanthropy shifts, oftentimes based on the sophistication of the organization. So at one organization, you might have a mid-level donor that's making a $500 gift. At another organization, a mid-level gift might be $5,000. It might be $10,000. So you really just have to take into consideration what data is going to be relevant to me and my organization, so that whatever we do is an appropriate fit. You're not going to go out and suddenly have success using Harvard's definition of a mid-level gift. That's just going to throw you for a loop.
Yeah. For sure. That's a great point. I mean, every organization has a different definition of what mid-level even is, and it varies greatly. And so you're right, Ryan. It's important to look at your organization to find what makes sense for you and get as much information as you can. And in the chat here, we had someone typing in that now really is the time to take out the garbage, clean it up. Take garbage in, garbage out. So take that trash out, and there's several reasons to take that trash out. First off, you don't want to be communicating the wrong things, right? Because you've got bad data, misinformation, sending things to the wrong place. And then second off, I mean, you might have a lot of trash in there that's costing you money too, right? Sometimes if you're paying for your CRM or your marketing automation or whatever on a per record basis, and you have a bunch of garbage in there that are bad old addresses, people who are disengaged, that's the sort of thing that you can start to look at and kind of carve out for yourself when you're thinking about budgeting in these uncertain times right now too, is clean the garbage out, take it out. You don't want that to stink up your database.
There's one, yes, I mean, 100% agree on the cleaning. And I've been saying for a number of weeks now, with people in non-profit, I mean, a lot of people are really busy and a lot of people are doing really, really hard, tough work, right? And then there are others that I've heard that are like, well, we're not sure what to do. And I'm like, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean, So let's get into that data and clean it up. I'm going to pick on a phrase though a little bit, Taylor. I'm going to push back on you just slightly on, the economic situation and where we are, and is it insensitive to ask and all of that. The thing is, we don't know, right? We don't know who in our databases is out of work or has economic challenges or what kind of, right? So let's not put ourselves in the position of making decisions for our donors and our community. And data, again, connection economy, data is the pathway to that. If we have built our messaging and our relationships around values and what people believe in, people still believe in the cause of our nonprofit right now is working with, I started to say landscape, that's the wrong word, but a nonprofit that works in land and land management and land protection, not a, coronavirus impacted nonprofit right now, but their donors have just leapt forward going, when we are back, when we can get back on the land, we want on the land, right? So I think we can all just be a little cautious of not making that decision for others and saying, oh, it's bad economic time, we shouldn't be asking. If a donor's offended that you ask, they probably would have been offended before this. So it gets to making those really strong connections, right, by knowing who people are. Sorry, one more thing, personalization. If anything is the end of the dear friend letter, dear God, please let it be this. Right? Being able to make that one-on-one connection, know my name and use it is huge, especially in digital.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, that's good pushback. I'm glad you called it out. Clay, if you didn't push back on me and I didn't push back on you, this wouldn't be a typical Clay and T-Shank conversation. So,
right. Yeah, right. We haven't talked about
we love
yet,
each other.
So once we check that off, we'll be, full.
Yeah, we got to check that box every time we talk. But that's why I think we like each other so much. So it's a good point. Don't make your decisions for your donors. And you're right. Like, if it's someone who gets that easily offended, like, get off my lawn anyways, right? Like, get off my lawn.
No, in fundraising, we say bless and release. We're going to bless and release them.
Bless and release. There you go. I say it a little bit more harshly, but I just, think about, like, get off my lawn. But you know what? Really good point, because if someone is deeply connected with your cause, even if they don't have the means right now to give, they're not going to be, coming at you with pitchforks and everything like that, So that's a good point that you made. I know we've got, I think we're a little bit over time, but anything, Ryan, Clay, you would leave us with one last final tip or word of wisdom?
Yeah, the whole push to digital, this is kind of a thought. It's meant to be a door turner. And so I think everyone should start thinking about this. At larger organizations, mainly in higher ed, but a few others, they started bringing in a position of a digital gift officer, right? So oftentimes when people think of wealth screening, the service that I represent, right, you think of that as major gifts. Now, there's a whole bunch of ways that can be applied to digital and multi-channel marketing. But if we think as we shift to digital, how might this fit in? What could we be doing independent of a service like ours? These big organizations have said, we have a digital gift officer or officers. And the role that they've served thus far has been to go out and work people towards that mid-level giving. Because if you're not flying out to visit people, it's a lot easier to have these kinds of meetings. Those organizations, and frankly, those people, are so well suited to the current time and place in which we live. And frankly, moving forward, this is going to change other organizations to do that as well. So if we're looking forward, how can we have a digital gift officer? What channels should they be utilizing? How should they be communicating with donors? And what goals should they have in a time like now? I think now outreach is probably the goal, right? But digital isn't just impacting what digital fundraising was initially intended for. It's, quite frankly, the future of fundraising, and every part of it will change, and this is accelerating it.
Yeah. Yep.
Clay, I'm going to write you a note and say, dear friend, and it's going to be the last time you ever get one of those.
Good. Let this be the end of the dear friend letter, email, text, whatever. I just, one final thought, a shout out to Kyle, because yes, indeed, they are Lego blocks, not Legos. Thank you for catching me on it. So let data be the Lego blocks that pave your way to connection. How was that?
Ooh.
Look at Jen. Jen's back and she.
Yes.
Washington.
On that note,
Fantastic. Slightly disturbing, right, with the removable hands, but good.
That
Good.
is amazing. That's amazing. All right. Well, we'll get you guys on a podcast sometime soon to talk about Legos. Does that sound good?
You know where to find us.